So my son just got home and asked me a question. He said, "Dad, I think we have a problem. That problem is that at school, they want me to dissect a shark in a few weeks, but I don't know if I can do that with the Torah and still obey God. What do you think?" So let me take you through the process of how we figured out the answer to do just that. So I thought about it and decided to take it through the process we always do whenever it comes to a question that we don't know whether it would be a good and obedient thing to Torah, a sin against Torah, or a state of uncleanliness that we need to be aware of, that if we do certain things in that could be a sin. But there's also another key issue, and that comes to be about the heart. But we're going to talk about that later here in the video. So let's jump in now to see where we started in the Torah and how we could resolve the issue of whether it's okay for him to dissect a shark at school or not. So in order to find out whether a shark is a clean or an unclean animal, we have to jump into Leviticus 11. Now, my son already knew that a shark was an unclean animal, but just as a quick refresher, let's jump in there and look at the animals. Leviticus 11 covers both land, sea, and sky animals, and we're going to jump in and look at the sea. And there's two primary factors for an animal to be clean in the sea. That is, one, it must have fins. And we know sharks have fins, so far we're okay. Two, it needs to have scales. Now, sharks don't have scales, and so this then allows them to fall out of the clean category. So a shark is an unclean animal. Now, the question is what can you do and not do with an unclean animal? Unclean animals aren't supposed to be used as sacrifices. You're not to eat them, and you're not to touch their carcasses. You're to let nature run its course with that. But is becoming unclean a sin? That is the question that we need to answer. And no matter where you go through the Bible, being unclean is not a sin. However, there are certain things that you cannot do when you are unclean, or you will be sinning. You see, every month women become unclean because of their menstrual period. Men, especially throughout teenage years, will become unclean because of seminal emission. You could be unclean because you are sick. You could be unclean because you touched an animal. You can become unclean because of a dead person. There are many ways that you can become unclean. Some of these in life you can control. Some of them you can't. But just because you're unclean doesn't mean you're sinning. So we know that we'll become unclean throughout our lives. Sometimes we have control and sometimes we don't. But why is it important that we know when we are clean and when we are unclean? And this comes back to how we approach God. We want to be able to come before Him and to be acceptable to Him. And in order to do that, we must be clean. Now, thankfully, God has made it very easy for anyone and everyone to be able to cleanse themselves when they've discovered that they've become unclean, whether that's intentional uncleanliness or intentional uncleanliness. Why would you want to become intentionally unclean? Well, there are times when you are working to save someone. There are times when a dead animal may have fallen in an area that you use. There are times when you might just need to go and comfort somebody who themselves is in an unclean state, which would then make you unclean. So God has simply asked us to do two things. The first is that we go and we wash our body and our clothes with water. There are some circumstances, which we'll talk about in another video, where you actually need to burn the stuff. But for your body, it is to wash it in water and to wait until nightfall, and then you will be cleansed again. God has created an amazing world out there, and no matter what you do, you can see some really amazing things going on just by standing back and observing. But you will find even more amazing miracles, things that show that there is only one way something could have been created, via a creator, an almighty God. But you got to get your hands dirty. And God is cyclical. He knows there's going to be times where we get dirty and we become clean again, that our actions will cause us to get dirty and come clean, that our thoughts will cause us to become dirty and need to be renewed and be cleaned. And he has provided a very good way for us to be able to do that. So, is it wrong for my son to go and get his hands dirty and dissect a shark and see how God designed a shark to work? No. Not so long as he recognizes that he's going to be unclean and that there's certain actions he can't do while he is unclean, and to stay away from those. But it should be a fun experiment. It should be an amazing time to be had to explore the miracles that God has created. And quite frankly, I'll make him take a shower anyways. And nightfall will come whether we want it to or not. So God is always driving for us to come back to him, to become clean, and to spend more time with him. Hope you have enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below how you can use this structure to find out what God has in his Torah and how you can follow it better. And remember, when you choose to follow Yahweh, obeying his everlasting commandments, you're choosing to stay within his blessings.